Perfect. Thank you. So first of all, one of the smells in this user story is using splitting the story along the process lines. Means design, code, test, document. You know. So a lot of people still go and say like, hey, as a tester, I want to test this feature so that when the code is ready, I can test the system. What customer value does it have? Zero. Because you can do hundreds of testing and you think these are the tests the customer really want. They really want to have a quality product, but actually you're not delivering anything with that story. There is no value in terms of customer. If you reach the customer and say like, hey, I've tested your product like this, they say like, okay, thank you. What's for me, right? What can I do? So this is one example, splitting along the process line. The second is like splitting across the architecture lines, like database, middle tier, UI. This is very common. In most of the companies you go, which I've been to, they still go and split that way. This is a UI team. This is a middle tier API team, backend team, database team. And as a developer, I want to create a database table. And that's the story they write. It's not a story. And they call it a technical story. So I'll come to the technical story later. But if you are slicing in terms of database, middle tier, and the UI, definitely you cannot reach your customer. You can do something, you can achieve something, but you have to go a long, long way before you can reach customer if you slice that way, right? You have to do entire database development, all the API development, all the UI development before you actually reach the customer. And by the time you reach the customer, what happens? The customer says, I'm not going to like the product. It's outdated. This is not the thing which I'm expecting, right? All those kind of wonderful things. Third is along the procedural lines. Like sometimes people have seen people writing a story, very complex story. Like as a customer, I need to create, save, edit, print, and email my item list so that I can update the list, validate the shipment against the printed list, and send the list to the right people. Well, if you want to put everything in one story, and then you try to do more like a spec. So a story is not a specification. Story is a smallest possible slice to drive a conversation around one point, one idea, so that you can finish and reach the customer to get the feedback if you're doing it right. In this case, if you want to create, you want to send an email, you want to know that, can you send an email to one person with some list, right? So if in order to validate that, you do not need to have all the features combined into that story. Just try to keep it small and try to keep that very unique value. You give a unique value to that customer so that you can reach them faster. The third is hard to understand the stories. So a lot of stories are written in such a way that it does make sense. For example, as a user, I would like to report on the product performance so that I can highlight profitable products and consider what to do about the products that is not successful. So basically what you're doing, you're putting your entire business idea in a story. The story is not the place to put your entire business idea. You can create a vision document or something and you can put you there. Here in this story, when you're creating and you want about the product performance, you straight say like, hey, I want to see that how many copies of this product have been sold, or how many items have been sold, and how many items sold in that order, so that I can go and see the product performance, right, of each of the product. So if you make your stories kind of without having any conclusion, without having any clear outcome, it becomes very difficult for the user to go and for the developers to go and develop that story. They will have 10,000 questions they're going to ask, like, hey, what do you mean by not successful? What do you mean by this is not profitable, right? So always try to keep things very simple and have one idea and a clear idea. Another point, and that is very important here, is about the spikes. You must have seen like, especially I've seen the companies I've been to, they create a lot of spikes. And basically what they do is turn the spikes into something like an analysis.
Yeah.
So they do a spike and they do the analysis in the name of a spike, right? That's not the purpose of the spike. The purpose of the spike is to reduce risk and uncertainty, right? And a spike should not be written as a, basically what you do when you create a spike, you borrow your time from the product owner and say like, hey, in order to deliver a successful story, I need to do some research. So I'm borrowing some time to do the research so that I can be faster, better, and more, I can deliver product faster, better, and more meaningfully. And every time when you create a spike, one thing that you need to understand is it must have a conclusion. Means you need to deliver something, no matter how small that is, along with a spike. A spike should not be just a kind of a research itself, a research with a conclusion in terms of software. So
Uh-huh.
I give an example. I was working for a company and they were trying to integrate at least 7, 8 systems, and they want to see whether it's going to work or not. So I say, like, don't just do a empty research. When you do the research, at least ping the system. Whether if you send a ping, and even that's going to be static, like it's going to send the ping, does it grow from one system to the other system to the third to the fourth to fifth and sixth, seventh system? If it goes through all the system, you think it works, then it validate your assumption, like, hey, your architecture, at least in the beginning, has the ability to be successful, right? So that's how you go and create your spikes with a definite conclusion, like I'm going to go and validate this hypothesis with this.
Yeah, what is
It
the
should not.
unknown? What is unknown actually, and what you want to validate with the spike?
Exactly, exactly. So there must be some element of software in that. It should not be empty. Just I'm going to go and do some research, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So that's a very important point. Another is user story smell is the technical stories. So, and a lot of people will not agree with me on this particular idea. However, I'm going to say there is nothing like a technical story. If there is a technical story, it means you have avoided refactoring your system for a long time.
Mhm.
That's why you're creating a technical stories,
Mhm.
right? And that the story cannot be a technical story because everything that we do for the users, we customer. Even if we're upgrading a system, it's just like a version upgrade. We are doing it so that there is a better performance, more security, more features that you're going to get. You go for the Windows upgrade, you go for any kind of an upgrade. With every upgrade, you get some kind of a functional or non-functional features, right? And that's the reason you upgrade, so that you can provide more features to the people, to the customers, or your system becomes more secure, more usable, less downtime. So there is a definite benefit of to the customer behind that upgrade. If there is absolutely no benefit, why would you do that, right? That's a simple thing. So in the recent example, I saw that there's a team, they're working on an application, and now they say like, hey, the application has become too big, and I need to slice this application into a smaller application so that I can deploy independently, each of those applications. So breaking a big application, a big monolith, into a smaller application and deploying it, that is important, right? And that work was done as a technical story because they have not been doing all from the beginning. They started thinking when a big monolith has already been created. If they would have done upfront, they would not have needed this. But even now, when they want to do it as a part of a story. So this is the story, and I'm going to go, and my story is going to be very small in terms of the customer, but I'm going to do a lot of those technical work behind the scene to make sure that my system also gets refactored, and I create smaller applications behind the scene. So that way, there is no room for technical stories in my mind.
So
There
I,
may be some occasions. Yeah, go ahead.
So I have a couple of questions on that and this point of the technical story. So one point which comes into my mind is some of the infrastructural setup which is required to be done for the project. For example, I am setting up a continuous integration environment which is needs to be done for the project, but it is, I mean, it is not aligned to a functional part of anything actually, or it is not a refactoring or something like to be done.
Yeah.
Another scenario which generally happens is the when I'm creating the frameworks. So I'm part of the framework team and I'm designing, I'm creating some of the features which are kind of technical in nature, which may not be having uh, any user which may be using it. It may be another technical framework which may be using that code itself, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So in those situations, don't you think that technical story, or I mean, this kind of idea will be making
Correct, correct. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've seen a lot of those. So my first question is going to be why we are doing it.
Mhm,
What if we don't do that?
mhm.
What we are not going to get it, right? Say you're working on Kubernetes, or
Yeah,
you're working on some kind of a, you know, what you call some kind of a technology that is very brand new, or maybe you're working on some kind of new new database that you want to go and incorporate or something like that, you know.
yeah.
So
I
the,
mean, for example, enterprise wide, we are trying to change this database from this to that, actually.
correct, correct, okay. So the question is, uh, there are two scenarios. One, you're already working with the user, and the second is you're starting afresh. So if you're starting new, then it's a totally different ballgame altogether. But say you're already working in an enterprise and there is already customers, and you want to change the whole database, right?
Mhm.
So can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So the key thing here is, even we are doing an infrastructure upgrade or something, and like I said, there will be some scenarios, very kind of those very rare scenarios where doing some proof of concept, and those in terms of things where you have to validate whether it's going to fit in your system or not. So for that, you have a spike. But even in that spike, when you're doing an infrastructure upgrade, you should have some kind of an end result where, like I said, it should not just be seen as this is going to go to the customer all the time, but you should be able to get some feedback. Like if I integrate at least portion of it, one portion of it, is it going to work? Is it going to go work with my customers, with my users or not?
Mhm.
You know, think of an example. You're going from on premises to cloud. You
Mhm.
take one API and you try to validate that if I put one API on the cloud, you know, with all the things, whatever the smallest piece, and now try to integrate with the users, maybe one user on the side, and see if it works with that system or not. And like I said, this story can take the whole iteration. But so long as you prove the hypothesis working with the user, even if single user is there, and then you develop. So 90% of your work is going to be on, you know, doing the technical work, and
Yeah.
maybe a very small portion that is going to go and validate. So all the time you have to do is to make sure that you are delivering some kind of a value to the user, right? And it works, or it may not work. And if it doesn't work, then we know that, hey, it didn't work. Then try more, try in a different way. But it should not be just an empty research, even in the infrastructure upgrade things. And like I said, some of the upgrades could be really big, and I totally understand it. And it's not confined to that small, what you call that you have to complete all the stories in 2 days.
Mhm.
No, it can take longer, because depending on the need, depending on that, the research that you're going to do, if you're creating a very complex billing mechanism, yes, some of the research can take longer. But that's the guidance. Like all the time when you're doing the spike, even on infrastructure items, try to do in such a way that you can keep the scope finite and small enough so that you can validate, you can get some data. And once you get some data from the user, like, okay, that's how it looks like, then you can go and start building on that. And like I said, this differs, and there could be like a very small area where you actually, there is a no way that you can finish the work in less than 15 days, or maybe 2 weeks. But I've seen that very rarely in those kind of a thing. It's possible. There could be possibility. There could be possibility, but it's absolutely impossible to split, because such a difficult kind of an upgrade that you just cannot do anything. But those are extremely rare.
Yeah.
But in majority of the cases, you will see like there is a way that you can split in such a way that you can reach the customer, you can reach the user and get the data. And the user could be internal, it's not necessarily external users, external customers. So
Definitely.
that's my answer to that.
Sure. You can continue the.
Well, okay. So another one is solution stories. And as a user, I want to right click the box to get all the edit option. So a lot of time I've seen the requirements come with a solution. If the requirements come with a solution, it's like just go and do it. We should never be in that mode that just go and do it. There is a developer, there is a whole team to think about the solutions. They're expert, they understand the system. And if you give them the solution, basically you're telling them, don't do anything, just follow it. And then that may not be the best thing for the system to do, because they have to maintain the system. They have to make the system scalable, maintainable. And if you give them a solution, then what is going to happen? The developer will think like, yes, that's exactly we have to go and develop. So that's the wrong way. So that's another smell. Do not give them solution. In this case, you don't tell them right click to edit. Let developer decide is hover on the story on the field is good enough, or there's some other way, right? And they will give you the best solution because they are engineer, they're trained in that. Another one is the customer data is not captured. And this is a point which very few people actually raise, and I raise that a lot. When you are creating, always think in terms of customer. So as a user, I can complete my profile to enter the system, right? So you have to create a profile before you enter the system. Now, when you're doing this story, basically what you're trying to do is to track how many people have successfully logged in, or how many people have successfully created a profile, or unsuccessfully they're not able to create a profile. You need to capture the data so that you know whatever feature that you delivered is actually being used, is usable. Another one is like what user behavior can be measured to determine the success. For example, say the percent of users who are using this new feature. The task completion rate means how many tasks have been completed. The task, if you have given to the customer, like creating a profile is a task. The task completion rate, all those things must be measured. So if your user story somehow or the other does not capture, capturing the data means in the acceptance criteria does not include capturing the data from the customer, it's not complete. So your user story must be written in such a way and also spread in such a way that it should include capturing the data. If it is just like a bland story and it does not capture the data, so basically what you're saying is you're just delivering and you're not interested in the feedback from the customer, right? And that data could be not for each story, but for a lot of stories, because that's the whole idea behind the stories, to create a